Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Vincent Morrison had built his life like a fortress, methodical, calculated, and seemingly impenetrable. At 38, he owned 3 successful auto repair shops across the city, each one a testament to his relentless work ethic and razor-sharp business instincts. His calloused hands told the story of a man who'd climbed from the gutters of Detroit's East Side, where his alcoholic father had abandoned him and his mother when he was 12. The morning sun cast long shadows across his flagship garage as Vincent wiped grease from his hands, surveying his domain. His employees moved with military precision. He'd handpicked each one, valuing loyalty above all else. Trust, once broken, was never mended in Vincent's world. It was a lesson he'd learned watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep food on the table after his father's betrayal. Boss, Mrs. Henderson's here about her transmission, called Tommy, his lead mechanic and one of the few people Vincent considered family. Vincent nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. 3 years had passed since the divorce, yet the wounds remained fresh. Claudia had taken half his assets, turned their twin daughters Emma and Sophie against him with her poison, and then delivered the cruelest blow of all, denying him custody of Lucas, his 7-year-old son, the boy who'd inherited Vincent's dark eyes and stubborn determination. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built this empire to provide for his family, working 16-hour days, missing school plays and soccer games. Claudia had called him absent, neglectful. But when Lucas got sick, when the cancer diagnosis turned their world upside down, Vincent had been the one fighting for every treatment, every chance at survival. His phone buzzed. Dr. Martinez from Children's Hospital. Vincent's chest tightened. It had been 3 months since Lucas passed, but every call from the hospital still sent ice through his veins. Mr. Morrison, I wanted to follow up on the memorial fund you established for Lucas. We've received some additional donations, and there's something else. Could you come in today? Vincent agreed, though he couldn't imagine what else needed discussing. He'd already paid every bill, established the fund, and even donated equipment to the pediatric oncology ward. Money couldn't bring Lucas back, but it was the only weapon he had left against the helplessness that had consumed him during those final weeks. As he drove to the hospital, memories flooded back. Lucas in the hospital bed, bald head gleaming under fluorescent lights, still managing to smile when Vincent read him stories about knights and dragons. Dad, when I'm better, will you teach me to fix cars? The question that would never need an answering. Dr. Martinez waited in his office, a manila folder on his desk. Vincent, I wanted you to hear this from me. We've been reviewing Lucas's case for a research study, and we discovered something troubling in his medical records. Vincent leaned forward, every muscle tense. What kind of troubling? Lucas's cancer was particularly aggressive, which puzzled us. However, we found traces of a specific chemical compound in his blood work, industrial-grade cleaning solvent, the kind used in manufacturing. The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. Are you saying someone poisoned my son? Not intentionally, but prolonged exposure could have triggered the cancer. This compound isn't found in typical household products. Someone in Lucas's environment was regularly exposed to it, and they brought it home on their clothes, skin. Vincent's mind raced. Claudia worked at a boutique marketing firm downtown. Emma and Sophie lived with her full-time. He'd never been around industrial solvents except. Doctor, would this compound be found in automotive restoration work? Specifically, vintage car restoration? Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. Absolutely. That's one of the primary sources. Vincent felt the foundation of his world shift. Trevor Blackstone, Claudia's lover, the man she'd left him for, owned a vintage car restoration business. The same man who'd been sleeping in Vincent's bed, living in Vincent's house, around Vincent's children for months before the divorce. The same man who might have unknowingly poisoned Lucas. But as Vincent sat in his truck outside the hospital, a darker thought crept in. What if it hadn't been unknowing? What if Trevor had seen Lucas as an obstacle, a reminder of Claudia's past life? The thought seemed insane, but Vincent had learned that people were capable of unimaginable evil when they wanted something badly enough. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer, Harold Stern. "Harold, I need you to quietly investigate something for me. Medical malpractice, environmental contamination, whatever angle you can find." And Harold? Discretion is everything. As he drove back to the garage, Vincent's grief began transforming into something harder, more focused. If Trevor had hurt Lucas, intentionally or not, there would be consequences. Vincent Morrison didn't forgive, and he never forgot. The game had just begun. Chapter 2. The Perfect Storm. 6 months before Lucas's diagnosis, Vincent had thought his marriage was solid. Sure, Claudia had been distant lately, more critical of his long hours, but he'd attributed it to stress from managing 3 kids while he built the business. He'd been planning to surprise her with a vacation to Hawaii, their first real getaway since Emma and Sophie were born. Instead, he came home early from a supplier meeting to find Claudia in their bedroom with Trevor Blackstone. The memory still burned. Not just the betrayal, but Claudia's reaction when she saw him standing in the doorway. No shame, no remorse, just cold calculation. "Vincent, we need to talk." Trevor had scrambled for his clothes, muttering apologies, but Claudia remained naked under the silk sheets Vincent had bought for their anniversary. "This has been going on for 6 months, she'd said, as if discussing the weather. "I want a divorce." Vincent had built his fortune by staying calm under pressure, but that afternoon he'd come dangerously close to violence. Only the sound of Lucas calling Daddy from downstairs had stopped him from wrapping his hands around Trevor's throat. The divorce proceedings had been brutal. Claudia hired Patricia Mills, the most vicious attorney in the city, while painting Vincent as an absent workaholic who cared more about his business than his family. She turned Emma and Sophie against him with carefully crafted lies about how Daddy didn't love them anymore, how he was trying to take them away from Mommy. But the cruelest blow came when she demanded primary custody of Lucas. "He needs stability," she'd argued in court. "Vincent's lifestyle isn't suitable for a young child." Judge Morrison, no relation, despite the name, had awarded Claudia primary custody of all 3 children, with Vincent getting every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. Half his assets, half his children, and somehow she'd made it seem like she was the victim. Now, armed with Dr. Martinez's revelation about the chemical compounds, Vincent began investigating Trevor Blackstone's background. What he discovered made his blood boil. Trevor wasn't just a vintage car restorer. He was a con artist with a pattern. In the past decade, he'd inserted himself into 3 other marriages, all wealthy women going through difficult periods. Each time, he'd love-bombed them, convinced them their husbands were inadequate, then moved in like a parasite. The first wife, Diana Westbrook, had lost custody of her children and most of her inheritance. The second, Rebecca Sterling, had suffered a mysterious allergic reaction that left her hospitalized for weeks, right after she'd started questioning Trevor's finances. The third, Margaret Crowley, had died in what police ruled an accidental overdose of sleeping pills. Vincent hired a private investigator named Rosa Delgado, a former detective who'd left the force after exposing corruption in her department. Rosa was thorough, ruthless, and most importantly, she operated in the gray areas where Vincent needed to work. "This guy's dangerous," Rosa reported during their meeting at a diner outside the city. "The pattern's too clean to be coincidence. He targets wealthy women with children, isolates them from their support systems, then gradually takes control of their assets. What about the chemical exposure? Could that have been intentional?" Rosa's expression darkened. "I pulled Trevor's work records. He's been cited multiple times for improper handling of toxic materials. Always claimed ignorance, paid the fines, moved on. But Vincent, there's something else." She slid a photograph across the table. It showed Trevor's workshop, but what caught Vincent's attention was the timing. The photo was dated 2 weeks before Lucas's first symptoms appeared. "I had a friend in environmental safety run some tests on samples I collected from Trevor's workshop. The chemical concentrations are off the charts, way beyond what you'd expect from normal restoration work. Either he's incredibly careless or he's been deliberately creating a toxic environment. Vincent's voice was barely a whisper, but Rosa heard the steel beneath it. There's more. I traced Trevor's movements during Lucas's treatment. 3 times, he visited the hospital when you weren't there. Security footage shows him in the children's wing, even though he had no official reason to be there. Vincent felt something cold and murderous settle in his chest. Trevor hadn't just stolen his wife and destroyed his family. He'd killed his son. Maybe not with his own hands, but through deliberate negligence that bordered on murder. That night, Vincent stood in Lucas's empty bedroom, looking at the model cars they'd built together, the superhero posters, the baseball glove that would never be used again. His phone rang, Claudia's number. "Vincent, we need to discuss the girls' summer plans." Her voice was calm, entitled, as if she hadn't destroyed everything good in his life. Vincent had planned to confront her about Trevor, about the chemicals, about what had really killed Lucas. Instead, he found himself saying, "Of course, whatever you think is best." The words tasted like poison, but Vincent had learned patience during his years building the business. Sometimes you had to let your enemies think they'd won before you destroyed them completely. After hanging up, he opened his laptop and began planning. Not just revenge, justice. Trevor and Claudia had taken everything from him. Now it was time to return the favor. The difference was Vincent Morrison played for keeps. Chapter 3. The knock at the door. The bridge stretched before Vincent like a gateway to oblivion. 3 weeks had passed since Lucas's funeral, 3 weeks of Emma and Sophie's accusing stares when he picked them up for his court-mandated visits. Claudia had poisoned them completely, turning his daughters into strangers who flinched when he tried to hug them. "Daddy doesn't care about us anymore," Sophie had whispered to Emma, not knowing Vincent could hear. "Mommy says he's just pretending." Standing on the steel girders in the pre-dawn darkness, Vincent understood how his father must have felt. Overwhelmed by responsibilities, crushed by failures, seeing no way forward. The difference was, Vincent had responsibilities that his father had abandoned. Emma and Sophie might hate him now, but they were still his daughters, still carried his blood. He thought of Lucas's last words, "Take care of the girls, Dad. They're going to need you." Even dying, his 7-year-old son had shown more strength than Vincent felt capable of mustering. Vincent climbed down from the bridge and drove home to his empty apartment. If he was going to survive this, he needed a plan. Not just for revenge, though that would come, but for rebuilding his relationship with his daughters and exposing the truth about what Trevor had done. 1 week later, Vincent was reviewing financial reports when a knock came. 3 sharp raps, followed by silence. He opened the door to find a woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a tailored coat despite the summer heat. "Mr. Morrison? My name is Eleanor Westbrook. I believe you knew my daughter, Diana." Vincent's breath caught. Diana Westbrook, Trevor's first victim, according to Rose's investigation. "Please come in." Eleanor settled into Vincent's living room with the bearing of old money and older pain. "I've been watching the news about your son's passing. I'm truly sorry for your loss. But I'm here because I believe the man who destroyed my daughter's life is responsible." She opened a leather portfolio and spread documents across Vincent's coffee table. Medical records, legal papers, photographs. A roadmap of destruction that looked disturbingly familiar. Diana met Trevor 5 years ago, shortly after her husband died in a car accident. She was vulnerable, grieving, trying to raise 2 young children alone. Trevor presented himself as a widower who understood her pain. The photos showed Diana's transformation, from a vibrant woman to someone hollow-eyed and frail. Within 6 months, she'd given him access to her finances. Within a year, she'd lost custody of her children and most of her inheritance. Trevor claimed she'd become unstable, addicted to prescription medications. The courts believed him. Eleanor's smile was bitter. "Trevor is very convincing. He had witnesses, people he'd paid or manipulated. Diana's own children testified against her, said she'd become erratic and violent. By the time I could intervene, it was too late." She pulled out a manila folder. "But Diana wasn't his first victim, and your wife wasn't his last. I've spent 3 years documenting Trevor's pattern, building a case that law enforcement refuses to pursue. Vincent studied the documents. 3 women, all wealthy, all vulnerable, all destroyed by the same man. Why are you coming to me now? Because you have something the others didn't. Resources, connections, and most importantly, nothing left to lose. I've read about you, Mr. Morrison. You built an empire from nothing. You understand strategy, patience, long-term planning. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes sharp as flint. I want Trevor Blackstone destroyed. Not just financially, completely. I want him to lose everything he's stolen, everything he values, everyone he's manipulated. And I want him to know it was because of what he did to our children. Vincent felt something stir in his chest. Not hope, exactly, but purpose. What are you proposing? An alliance. I have information, connections, resources from my late husband's business empire. You have skills I lack and motivation I understand. Together, we can accomplish what neither of us could alone. She pulled out a final document, a detailed psychological profile of Trevor Blackstone, compiled by a forensic psychiatrist. Trevor is a narcissist with sociopathic tendencies. He believes he's untouchable because he's never faced real consequences. That's his weakness. Vincent scanned the profile. Everything aligned with what Rosa had discovered, but Eleanor's information went deeper. Trevor's childhood, his previous identities, his methods of manipulation, all laid out like a battle plan. There's something else, Eleanor continued. Trevor's been courting another victim, Melissa Chong, a pharmaceutical heiress whose husband died last year. She has twin daughters, same ages as yours. If we don't stop him soon, he'll destroy another family. The thought of Trevor destroying more children, more families, crystallized Vincent's resolve. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about preventing future victims. What do you need from me? Eleanor smiled, and for the first time since Lucas died, Vincent felt like he wasn't alone. Everything you've got, Mr. Morrison. This is going to be war. As Eleanor left, Vincent stood in his doorway, watching her disappear into the night. The knock at his door hadn't brought salvation. It had brought something better. It had brought purpose, allies, and the beginning of Trevor Blackstone's downfall. Vincent poured himself a scotch and began reading Eleanor's files. By morning, he would know everything there was to know about his enemy. By the end of the month, Trevor would begin to understand what it felt like to lose everything. The game was about to begin in earnest, and Vincent Morrison had just gained a powerful ally in his quest for justice. Chapter 4: The Web Titans. Eleanor's intelligence network was more extensive than Vincent had imagined. Her late husband, Richard Westbrook, had been a federal judge with connections throughout law enforcement and the legal community. Eleanor had spent 3 years quietly building alliances with others who'd encountered Trevor's pattern of destruction. They met again in Eleanor's Beacon Hill mansion, a room lined with legal documents and surveillance photos. Also present was Dr. Sarah Chan, a forensic accountant who'd worked with the FBI, and Marcus Rivera, a former Special Forces operator who now ran corporate security. Trevor's made a critical mistake, Eleanor announced, spreading new photographs across the mahogany table. He's gotten greedy. The photos showed Trevor with Melissa Chong, the pharmaceutical heiress Eleanor had mentioned. But what caught Vincent's attention were the background details. Trevor was wearing an expensive watch he couldn't afford, driving a car registered to Claudia, and most damning, he was using the same engagement ring he'd given Diana Westbrook 5 years earlier. Melissa's father built Chong Pharmaceuticals from nothing, Dr. Chen explained. She inherited controlling interest when he died, but she's been struggling with the business side. Perfect target for Trevor's usual approach. Marcus placed additional surveillance photos on the table. We've been monitoring Trevor's routine. He's gotten sloppy, confident. But here's the interesting part. He's been making regular visits to a storage facility outside the city. Vincent studied the images. Trevor entering and leaving a nondescript building with boxes, always at night, always alone. What's he storing? That's what we need to find out, Eleanor said. But first, we need to understand the timeline. How quickly is he moving with Melissa? Dr. Chun pulled out financial records. Faster than before. Melissa's already given him access to one of her smaller accounts, about $500,000. If the pattern holds, he'll propose within a month and have full access to her assets within 6 months. Vincent felt the familiar rage building. And her daughters? Ages 8 and 9. He's already started the grooming process, positioning himself as their new father figure while undermining their relationship with Melissa's family. The parallel to his own situation was nauseating. Vincent thought of Emma and Sophie, how Trevor had slowly inserted himself into their lives, turning them against their father with gifts and promises while painting Vincent as the enemy. "We can't let him destroy another family," Vincent said quietly. "What's our move?" Eleanor smiled. "We're going to give Trevor exactly what he wants, access to more money than he's ever imagined. But this time, it's going to be a trap." She explained the plan with the precision of a master strategist. Vincent would use his business connections to arrange a meeting between Trevor, a wealthy widow looking for investment opportunities in vintage car restoration. The widow would be Rosa Delgado, the private investigator, playing a role with an elaborate backstory Eleanor had constructed. "Trevor won't be able to resist," Eleanor continued. "Rosa will present herself as vulnerable, recently bereaved, with more money than she knows how to invest. He'll see an opportunity to run his usual con while maintaining his relationship with Melissa." Marcus pulled out building schematics. "While Trevor's focused on Rosa, we'll have access to his storage facility. Whatever he's hiding there, it's important enough that he visits every week." Dr. Chin added, "I've also been analyzing the financial patterns from his previous victims. There's money missing, significant amounts that never appeared in Trevor's known accounts. He's hiding assets somewhere." Vincent studied the plan, looking for weaknesses. "What about Claudia? She'll warn Trevor if she suspects anything." "That's the beauty of it," Eleanor replied. "Claudia doesn't know about Trevor's pattern. She thinks she's special, that their relationship is real. We're going to use her ignorance against her." The meeting ended with specific assignments. Vincent would make the introduction between Trevor and wealthy widow Rosa. Marcus would handle surveillance and break into the storage facility. Dr. Chun would continue tracking financial patterns. Eleanor would coordinate everything from behind the scenes. As Vincent drove home, he called Rosa to brief her on the plan. "Can you pull off playing a grieving widow with money to burn?" Rosa's laugh was sharp. "Vincent, I've been undercover with drug cartels and human traffickers. I think I can handle one small-time con artist." Trevor's not small-time. He's dangerous, and he's smart. But he's not expecting resistance. That's his weakness. He's used to victims, not opponents. We're going to show him the difference. That evening, Vincent video called Emma and Sophie. Claudia supervised from off-camera, as required by the custody agreement. His daughters were polite but distant, still poisoned against him by months of Claudia's manipulation. "How was school today?" Vincent asked. "Fine," Emma replied, not meeting his eyes through the screen. Sophie was more direct. "Mommy says you don't really care about us anymore. She says you're just asking because the judge makes you." The words hit like physical blows, but Vincent forced himself to stay calm. "Your mother is wrong. I love you both more than anything in the world. I know it's hard to believe right now, but I'm working to fix things." After the call ended, Vincent sat in the darkness of his apartment. Trevor hadn't just killed Lucas. He'd stolen Vincent's daughter's love and trust. But that was about to change. Phase 1 of the plan would begin tomorrow. Trevor Blackstone had spent years preying on grieving families, but he'd never faced someone who fought back with the same ruthless intelligence he used to destroy others. Vincent poured himself a scotch and raised it in a silent toast to Lucas's memory. Justice was coming, and it would be brutal. Chapter 5: The Bait. Rosa Delgado had transformed herself into exactly the type of woman Trevor couldn't resist. Margaret Thornfield, wealthy widow, recently lost her husband to cancer, inherited his successful importing business, but felt overwhelmed by the financial complexities. She dressed the part, expensive but conservative clothes, understated jewelry, the kind of nervous energy that suggested vulnerability beneath the wealth. Vincent arranged the meeting at his flagship garage, selling it as a coincidence. "Trevor, I'd like you to meet Margaret Thornfield." "Margaret, this is Trevor Blackstone. He's the vintage car restoration expert I mentioned." Trevor's reaction was immediate and predictable. His eyes lit up with predatory interest, but he played it smooth, offering condolences for her loss and expertise for her automotive investments. Within minutes, he was suggesting dinner to discuss potential business partnerships. "I've been looking for someone who understands classic cars," Rosa said, playing Margaret perfectly. "My late husband left me a collection, but I don't know their value or how to maintain them properly." Trevor practically salivated. "I'd be happy to take a look. These investments can be quite profitable if handled correctly." Vincent excused himself, letting the two continue their conversation. Through the garage's security cameras, he watched Trevor deploy his full charm offensive, sympathetic listener, knowledgeable expert, understanding friend who just happened to be devastatingly handsome. That evening, Marcus Rivera prepared for the storage facility break-in. The building was in an industrial area with minimal security, perfect for someone who didn't want their activities scrutinized. Marcus had military-grade equipment and the skills to use it without leaving evidence. "Remember, we're gathering information, not stealing anything," Eleanor instructed through his earpiece. "We need to know what Trevor's hiding, but we can't tip him off that we're onto him." Vincent waited in Eleanor's study, monitoring communications while Dr. Chun worked her financial magic on another computer. They discovered that Trevor had been siphoning money from his victims through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. "He's been planning this for years," Dr. Chun reported. "The money from Diana Westbrook, Rebecca Sterling, even some of Margaret Crowley's assets. It's all been filtered through fake businesses and parked in the Cayman Islands." Marcus's voice crackled through the radio. "I'm inside. Jesus Christ. Eleanor, you need to see this." The storage unit was larger than expected, filled with boxes of documents, photographs, and personal items. But what made Vincent's blood run cold were the walls, covered with photos and detailed notes about Trevor's victims. Diana, Rebecca, Margaret, Claudia, and most chilling of all, a new section dedicated to Melissa Chong and her daughters. "He's been planning Melissa's destruction for months," Marcus reported, photographing everything. There are detailed psychological profiles, financial records, even transcripts of her therapy sessions. This guy's not just a con artist. He's a full-blown stalker. But the worst discovery was in the final box. Medical records, lab reports, and chemical analyses, all related to the compounds found in Lucas's blood. Trevor had been deliberately exposing the boy to toxic chemicals for months before the cancer diagnosis. Vincent's hands shook as Marcus transmitted the images. There it was, in Trevor's own handwriting. "Subject shows increasing sensitivity to compound exposure. Recommend increasing frequency of contact to accelerate timeline." Eleanor's voice was steel. "He murdered your son, Vincent. This is premeditated murder." The evidence was overwhelming, but Vincent knew the legal system would take years to prosecute, if they could make the charges stick at all. Trevor was careful, experienced, and he had Claudia's testimony that Vincent was unstable and vindictive. "We have enough to destroy him," Dr. Chin said, reviewing the financial evidence. "These offshore accounts, the stolen assets, the fraudulent business records. I can unravel his entire operation." But Vincent wanted more than Trevor's money. He wanted the man to understand what it felt like to lose everything, to watch helplessly as his world collapsed piece by piece. "Rosa's dinner with Trevor is tomorrow night," Vincent said quietly. "We proceed with the plan, but now we know exactly what we're dealing with." Eleanor nodded. "A predator who's never faced consequences. That changes tomorrow." Marcus finished photographing the evidence and prepared to leave. "There's something else. I found plane tickets. Trevor's planning to leave the country next month. Probably when he gets access to Melissa's full assets." The timeline had just compressed. Whatever they were going to do, it had to happen fast. As Vincent drove home, he thought about Lucas's final days, how Trevor had visited the hospital when Vincent wasn't there. Had he been checking on his handiwork, ensuring the chemicals were doing their intended damage? The rage was becoming something else, something colder and more focused. Trevor Blackstone had spent years hunting vulnerable families, but he'd made a critical error. He'd targeted Vincent Morrison's family, And Vincent Morrison was nobody's victim. Tomorrow night, the real game would begin. And this time, Trevor would be the one walking into a trap. Chapter 6, The First Strike. Rosa played her role to perfection during dinner. She was vulnerable, but not desperate. Wealthy, but not flaunting it. Exactly the kind of target Trevor had perfected over years of hunting. Vincent watched from across the restaurant, hidden behind a newspaper, as Trevor deployed his full arsenal of manipulation. "I lost my wife to cancer 3 years ago." Trevor lied smoothly, reaching across the table to touch Rosa's hand. "I understand the pain of watching someone you love suffer." Rosa's performance was flawless, tears in her eyes, gratitude for his understanding, slowly opening up about her loneliness and fear of making the wrong financial decisions. By the end of the evening, Trevor was offering to personally evaluate her husband's car collection. "I have a warehouse in Newton where I could examine them properly," he suggested. "No charge, of course. I just want to help." Vincent smiled grimly. The warehouse was another property Trevor had acquired through his cons, registered under one of his shell companies. Taking Rosa, there would give them access to more of his operation. The next morning, Eleanor convened an emergency meeting. Marcus had discovered something troubling during his surveillance of Melissa Chong. Trevor was accelerating his timeline with her as well. "He proposed last night," Eleanor announced, showing them photos from Marcus's surveillance. 3 months ahead of his usual schedule. Something spooked him. Dr. Chin pulled up financial records on her laptop. "I might know what." Melissa's company is facing a hostile takeover bid. If it succeeds, her personal wealth will be locked up in legal battles for years. Trevor needs to move fast to access her assets. Vincent studied the timeline. "How long do we have?" 2 weeks, maybe less. Melissa's agreed to a quick ceremony in Vegas. Once they're married, Trevor will have legal access to everything. The plan needed adjustment. They couldn't wait for Trevor to slowly reveal himself. They had to force his hand immediately. "Rosa's warehouse visit is tomorrow," Vincent said. "We use that to begin the pressure." "Marcus, can you modify your surveillance to make Trevor paranoid?" Marcus grinned. "I can make him think he's being followed without him ever seeing who's doing it." Classic psychological warfare. Eleanor added her resources. "I have contacts in the IRS who can begin routine audits of Trevor's shell companies. Nothing that would tip him off immediately, but enough to make him nervous." Dr. Chun had been working on something more sophisticated. "I've been analyzing Trevor's psychological profile. He's a narcissist who believes he's untouchable, but he's also deeply paranoid about exposure. If we can make him think multiple threats are closing in simultaneously, he'll make mistakes," Vincent finished. "Get sloppy." The pieces were falling into place. Rosa would lead Trevor to the warehouse, where Marcus would be waiting with surveillance equipment. Dr. Chun would trigger financial investigations that would make Trevor's money harder to access. Eleanor would use her legal connections to create background pressure. And Vincent would begin phase 2 of his personal revenge against Claudia. That afternoon, Vincent called his ex-wife. "Claudia, we need to discuss the girls' school situation. I want to contribute more to their education." Claudia's voice was suspicious. "What kind of contribution?" "Private school. The best money can buy. Emma and Sophie deserve every advantage." It was a calculated move. Claudia's greed would overcome her suspicion, and she'd see Vincent's offer as validation that she'd won their battle. But what she didn't know was that Vincent had chosen a school with a particular specialty. They required extensive background checks on all adults in the children's lives. Within days, the school would be asking uncomfortable questions about Trevor's frequent presence around the girls, his lack of formal employment history, his suspicious financial background. The investigation would seem routine, but it would put Trevor under exactly the kind of scrutiny he'd spent years avoiding. Rosa called that evening. Trevor took the bait. "We're meeting at the warehouse tomorrow at 2 p.m. He's bringing some kind of chemical testing equipment. Says he wants to check for environmental damage to the cars." Vincent's blood chilled. Chemical testing equipment, just like he'd used on Lucas. "Change of plans," Vincent said. "We're not just gathering evidence anymore. Tomorrow, we start destroying him." Eleanor was waiting when Vincent arrived at her mansion. "Are you sure about this?" Once we cross this line, there's no going back. Vincent thought about Lucas in the hospital bed, asking why the treatments weren't working. He thought about Emma and Sophie learning to hate their father because of Trevor's manipulation. He thought about Melissa Chang's daughters, who would be next if they didn't act. "He murdered my son," Vincent said quietly. There was never any going back. Eleanor nodded. "Then tomorrow, we begin the reckoning." As Vincent prepared for sleep, he felt something he hadn't experienced since Lucas died. Anticipation. Not happiness, not hope, but the cold satisfaction of a plan coming together. Trevor Blackstone had spent years destroying families without consequences. Tomorrow, the consequences would begin. Chapter 7. The Trap Springs. The Newton warehouse stood like a monument to Trevor's years of theft, purchased with Diana Westbrook's money, registered under a shell company funded by Rebecca Sterling's assets, and used to store the trophies of his various cons. Rosa arrived precisely at 2 p.m., playing the nervous widow to perfection. Vincent watched from a van across the street, monitoring the audio feed from Rosa's hidden microphone. Marcus was positioned inside the warehouse, having gained entry during the early morning hours. Dr. Chan worked from Eleanor's study, ready to execute the financial attacks that would begin unraveling Trevor's empire. "Margaret, thank you for trusting me with this." Trevor's voice came through the speakers, oily with false sincerity. "I want to make sure these cars are properly preserved. They're not just investments, they're pieces of history." Rosa played her part beautifully. "I just don't understand any of this." Richard handled all the business affairs. "I feel so lost without him." Trevor's response was predictable. Reassurance, offers of guidance, subtle suggestions that she needed a man to protect her from the complexities of wealth. Vincent had heard the same script used on Claudia, the same predatory patience that had destroyed his marriage. But today, Trevor was walking into a carefully constructed trap. "I brought some testing equipment," Trevor continued. "We need to check for environmental contamination. Old cars can leak chemicals that affect their value." Vincent's hands clenched. The same equipment, the same excuse Trevor had used to introduce toxic compounds into Vincent's home. The man was so confident in his methods that he was literally reusing his murder weapon. Marcus's voice crackled through the earpiece. "He's got a full kit. Industrial solvents, testing strips, the works. This is exactly what he used on Lucas." That was the signal. Dr. Chin began her assault on Trevor's financial network, triggering simultaneous audits of 3 shell companies while freezing assets in 2 offshore accounts. The attacks would take hours to fully manifest, but they would create immediate pressure. Eleanor was handling the legal front, using her deceased husband's connections to trigger investigations into Trevor's business licenses and environmental safety practices. By evening, Trevor would be facing scrutiny from multiple agencies. But Vincent's contribution was more personal. He called Claudia. "I need to see the girls tonight." "Emergency." "Vincent, it's not your scheduled day." "Claudia, Emma fell off her bike and needed stitches." "I'm at the hospital now." The lie came easily, and Claudia's maternal instincts overrode her hostility. "Which hospital?" "I'm coming now." "Children's Medical Center." "Emergency room." "And Claudia? You might want to leave Trevor at home. The girls are asking for their parents, not strangers." It was a calculated insult, designed to plant the first seed of doubt about Trevor's role in the family. While Claudia rushed to the hospital to find healthy daughters and a fabricated emergency, Trevor would be left alone to deal with the mounting pressure from the financial and legal attacks. At the warehouse, Trevor's phone began ringing. First his accountant, then his lawyer, then his banker. Each call brought worse news. Frozen accounts, investigation notices, demand for documentation he couldn't provide. "I'm sorry, Margaret," Trevor said, his smooth composure cracking. "I need to handle some business emergencies. Perhaps we could continue this another day." Rosa pressed her advantage. "Oh no, is everything all right? You look upset. Just some misunderstandings with financial institutions. Nothing serious." But Trevor's hands were shaking as he packed his chemical testing equipment. The man who'd spent years as a predator was discovering what it felt like to be prey. Vincent's phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "He's leaving, moving fast, keeps looking over his shoulder." Whatever Chin did, it worked. The The psychological pressure was having its intended effect. Trevor was beginning to feel the walls closing in, but he didn't yet understand the scope of what was happening to him. Vincent drove to Children's Medical Center, where Claudia was demanding to see her injured daughter. "Where is she? Where's Emma?" "She's fine," Vincent said calmly. "I made a mistake. It wasn't Emma who was hurt. It was another child with the same name. Emma and Sophie are at your house, perfectly safe." Claudia's relief quickly turned to fury. "You lied to me. You dragged me across the city for nothing." "I was scared," Vincent replied, playing the concerned father. "When someone called about an injured child named Emma Morrison, I panicked. I didn't think clearly. It was a reasonable explanation, but it served a darker purpose." Vincent needed Claudia away from Trevor during the initial phase of their attack. By the time she returned home, Trevor would be deep in crisis mode, and his careful facade would be cracking. Eleanor called with an update. The IRS has found irregularities in 3 of Trevor's companies. He's facing immediate audits and potential criminal charges for tax evasion. Dr. Chun added her report. His offshore accounts are frozen pending investigations. I estimate he's lost access to about $8 million in the last 4 hours. Vincent felt cold satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Trevor had spent years slowly destroying his victims, but Vincent preferred a more direct approach. By tomorrow, Trevor would understand that his past had finally caught up with him. As evening fell, Vincent returned to his apartment to prepare for Phase 2. Trevor was wounded and paranoid, but he was still dangerous. The real test would come when he realized this wasn't random bad luck. Someone was deliberately hunting him. Vincent poured himself a scotch and called Rosa for her debrief. She performed flawlessly, but more importantly, she'd gotten Trevor to reveal his methods and equipment. The evidence would be crucial for what came next. "He's exactly what we thought," Rosa reported. "Confident, manipulative, and completely convinced of his own invincibility. But he's also starting to crack under pressure." Perfect. Trevor Blackstone had built his life on being the hunter, never the hunted. Vincent was about to teach him the difference, and the lesson would be brutal. Chapter 8. The Walls Close In. Trevor's world began collapsing with mathematical precision. By morning, 4 separate government agencies were investigating his businesses. His assets were frozen in 3 countries, and his carefully constructed identity was unraveling thread by thread. Vincent watched the destruction unfold from Eleanor's study, surrounded by monitors displaying Trevor's mounting crisis. Dr. Chun had orchestrated the financial assault with surgical precision. Each frozen account, each triggered audit, each investigation notice designed to maximize psychological pressure while remaining legally bulletproof. He tried to access his primary offshore account 6 times last night, Dr. Chun reported. Each denial is being logged by the Cayman Islands Banking Authority. The man's panicking. Marcus had maintained surveillance throughout the night. Trevor's been awake since 3 a.m., making phone calls, pacing his apartment. He's paranoid, but hasn't figured out this is coordinated. The genius of Eleanor's plan was its apparent randomness. To Trevor, it looked like a series of coincidental investigations and bureaucratic mistakes. He couldn't see the web that was tightening around him. But Vincent wanted more than financial destruction. He wanted Trevor to experience the same helplessness that had consumed Vincent during Lucas's final days. "It's time for Phase 3, Vincent announced. "Eleanor, can your contacts arrange a wellness check on Trevor? Anonymous tip about potential self-harm." Eleanor smiled grimly. "Already in motion. Police should arrive within the hour. The wellness check would find nothing dangerous, but it would add another layer of scrutiny. Trevor would have to explain to police why someone thought he was suicidal, why his finances were under investigation, why his business licenses were being questioned. More importantly, it would establish an official record of Trevor's deteriorating mental state." Vincent's phone rang. Claudia, predictably furious about the previous night's hospital incident. "I don't know what game you're playing, but—" "No games," Vincent interrupted. "I was scared about Emma. I made a mistake. It happens to people who actually care about their children." The barb at home. Claudia's voice became defensive. "I care about my children. Everything I do is for them." including bringing Trevor around them, a man who's currently under investigation by the IRS. Vincent had planted the seed carefully. Claudia didn't know about the investigations yet, but her silence confirmed his suspicion. She was already sensing that something was wrong with Trevor's sudden financial problems. "What are you talking about?" asked Trevor, Vincent suggested. "Ask him why his accountant's been calling all morning, why his bank accounts are frozen, why the DEA is suddenly interested in his chemical storage practices." Vincent hung up before Claudia could respond. The doubt was planted, and Claudia's own greed would do the rest. She'd start asking Trevor uncomfortable questions, adding domestic pressure to his mounting professional crisis. At Eleanor's mansion, Marcus reported another development. Melissa Chong postponed the Vegas wedding. Her lawyers are advising caution until Trevor's financial situation stabilizes. Vincent felt satisfaction settle in his chest. Melissa was safe, at least temporarily. Her daughters wouldn't become Trevor's next victims. But the real psychological warfare was just beginning. Vincent had prepared a package for Trevor: copies of medical records, chemical analysis reports, and most damning of all, photographs from the storage unit showing Trevor's documentation of Lucas's poisoning. He didn't sign the package or include a return address. Just the evidence, delivered to Trevor's apartment by courier. "He's going to know someone's onto him," Eleanor warned. "Good," Vincent replied. "I want him to know. I want him to understand that Lucas had a father who doesn't forgive or forget." Rosa called with her final report from playing Margaret Thornfield. "Trevor canceled our follow-up meeting. His exact words were unexpected business complications. The man's running scared." By afternoon, the cascade was unstoppable. Trevor's business insurance was canceled due to environmental safety concerns. His workshop lease was terminated for chemical violations. His car restoration license was suspended pending investigation. But the cruelest blow came when Claudia finally confronted him. Marcus had positioned listening devices near Trevor's apartment, and Vincent could hear the argument through his earpiece. Claudia's voice was shrill with panic. "The IRS called me. Trevor, they want to know about my financial relationship with you. They're asking about gifts, about money transfers." Trevor's response was desperate. "It's just a misunderstanding. Some paperwork got mixed up. I'll handle it." "Handle it? Your bank accounts are frozen. The police came due a welfare check. What the hell is happening?" Vincent smiled coldly. The pressure was working exactly as planned. Trevor was being forced to choose between maintaining his facade with Claudia or focusing on his survival. And Vincent knew which choice a narcissist would make. "Claudia, I need to leave town for a few days. Business trip. Things will calm down while I'm gone." "Leave town? Now? What about Emma and Sophie? What about us?" "This isn't about us. It's about business. You wouldn't understand." The mask was slipping. Under pressure, Trevor was revealing his true nature. The cold manipulation, the dismissive arrogance, the complete lack of genuine feeling for anyone but himself. Vincent heard Claudia's sharp intake of breath. For the first time, she was seeing Trevor as Vincent had always seen him, a predator who used people until they were no longer useful. "I'm taking the girls to my mother's," Claudia said quietly, "until you figure out what's happening." It was the beginning of the end for Trevor's relationship with Claudia, but Vincent knew the man wouldn't go quietly. Cornered predators were dangerous, and Trevor still had one card to play. He could expose what he'd done to Lucas, potentially implicating Claudia as an accomplice. As evening fell, Vincent prepared for the final phase. Trevor was wounded, isolated, and desperate, but he was also at his most dangerous. The reckoning was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 9. The Final Reckoning. Trevor's desperation made him reckless. Faced with the complete collapse of his carefully constructed life, he chose the nuclear option. If he was going down, he'd take Claudia with him. Vincent intercepted the call through Marcus's surveillance equipment. Trevor's voice was different now. Gone was the smooth charm, replaced by barely controlled panic. "Claudia, we need to talk. About Lucas. About what really happened." The silence on Claudia's end spoke volumes. Vincent realized with cold clarity that his ex-wife had known more than she'd admitted. Perhaps not the full scope of Trevor's deliberate poisoning, but something. I don't know what you mean, Claudia said, but her voice lacked conviction. The chemicals in my workshop, the ones Lucas was exposed to when he visited. You knew they were dangerous, but you brought him anyway because you wanted Vincent to suffer. Vincent's blood turned to ice. Claudia hadn't just been Trevor's victim. She'd been his accomplice. The woman he'd loved, the mother of his children, had deliberately endangered Lucas out of spite. Marcus's voice crackled through the earpiece. Vincent, we're recording everything. This is evidence of premeditated murder. But evidence wasn't enough anymore. Not for what they'd done to Lucas. Eleanor was monitoring police communications from her study. Trevor's trying to negotiate immunity by offering information about Claudia. He's desperate enough to destroy her completely. Vincent made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life, but felt as inevitable as breathing. Eleanor, I need you to make a call. Tell the police you have evidence of a murder conspiracy, but the witness needs protection before he'll talk. Vincent, what are you planning? Justice. Vincent drove to Trevor's apartment building, arriving just as police cars pulled up outside. Trevor was trapped between multiple investigations and Claudia's growing suspicion. His only escape was to flee the country, but his frozen assets made that impossible. Perfect. Vincent waited in the parking garage, knowing Trevor's patterns from weeks of surveillance. The man was predictable in crisis. He'd try to retrieve cash and documents from a hidden safe in his storage unit, then disappear before anyone could connect all the pieces of his various crimes. Trevor emerged from the elevator at 11 p.m., moving fast but trying to appear casual. He was carrying a duffel bag and kept checking his phone, probably monitoring his frozen accounts, hoping for a miracle that would never come. Vincent stepped out of the shadows as Trevor reached his car. Hello, Trevor. Trevor spun around, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally, terror. Vincent, what are you doing here? I wanted to thank you, Vincent said conversationally. You taught me something valuable about justice. Trevor's hand moved toward his pocket, but Vincent was faster. Years of physical labor had kept him strong, and months of planning had given him every advantage. You see, I spent months thinking about legal justice, Vincent continued, backing Trevor against his car. Courts, lawyers, evidence, appeals. All very civilized. But then I realized, you never gave Lucas a fair trial before you murdered him. It wasn't murder, Trevor stammered. The chemicals were an accident. I didn't know. Vincent pulled out his phone and played the recording of Trevor's conversation with Claudia. Trevor's own voice filled the garage. The chemicals in my workshop. The ones Lucas was exposed to when he visited. Trevor's face went white. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove anything to anyone but myself. What happened next was swift, efficient, and utterly final. Vincent had learned patience during his years building his business empire, but he'd also learned that some problems required permanent solutions. When police found Trevor's body 3 days later, it looked like suicide, a desperate man facing multiple investigations and the collapse of his entire life, choosing to end it rather than face the consequences. The note, written in Trevor's own handwriting, confessed to the murders of Lucas Morrison and Margaret Crowley, apologized to his victims' families, and expressed remorse for a lifetime of manipulation and theft. The handwriting was genuine because Vincent had forced Trevor to write it before ending his miserable existence. Eleanor destroyed the surveillance equipment and financial records that could have led back to their group. Dr. Chun eliminated the digital trail of their investigation. Marcus ensured that no physical evidence remained. The official investigation concluded that Trevor Blackstone had been a serial predator who'd finally cracked under the weight of his crimes in multiple investigations. His stolen assets were recovered and returned to his victims' families. Melissa Chong and her daughters were safe. Claudia faced her own reckoning. The recording of her conversation with Trevor was anonymously sent to the police, along with evidence of her complicity in Lucas's murder. She was arrested 2 weeks later and eventually sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy and child endangerment. Vincent fought for and won full custody of Emma and Sophie. It took months of therapy and patience, But gradually his daughters began to understand that their father had never stopped loving them, had never stopped fighting for them. They never learned the full truth about Trevor's death or their father's role in their mother's imprisonment. Some truths were too heavy for children to carry. On the anniversary of Lucas's death, Vincent stood at his son's grave with Eleanor, Marcus, Dr. Chun, and Rosa, the unlikely family he'd found in his quest for justice. They'd done something the legal system couldn't or wouldn't do. They'd stopped a predator permanently and saved future victims. Vincent placed a small model car on Lucas's headstone, the same type they'd built together during those final precious weeks. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "I took care of the girls. And I made sure the monster who hurt you can never hurt anyone again." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment, Vincent could almost hear his son's voice. "I knew you would, Dad. I always knew you would." Vincent Morrison had learned that some wrongs couldn't be forgiven, some enemies couldn't be redeemed, and some justice couldn't be achieved through civilized means. He'd paid a price for that knowledge. Pieces of his soul he'd never recover. But Emma and Sophie were safe. Future children were safe. And Trevor Blackstone would never destroy another family. It was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.